I think that these these men have lived very full lives, probably don't think about the Stanford Prison Experiment very often, to be honest, when they're dealing with family and work and so on. But I do think that I think it affected them in at least in some way, and some more than others. Most definitely, a guard named Chuck Burton says that this experience was one of the three most pivotal experiences of his entire life, including adopting his child. So there was a spectrum for sure, of how it affected the different people and different individuals. But I think it's a testament to them that they were able to come participate in this thing and talk about it.
Life a la Latina presenta Socialiciando. Sí, Socialiciando. Con Alicia Civita.
Hey, Juliette, how you doing? What an honor.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited about your series. I mean, it's sparked conversations in my family already. And I'm
Oh,
sure
wow.
it's going to happen everywhere in the country and in the world.
Oh, I hope so. That's the hope. That's the great hope, that it at least inspires conversations in the family.
What made you interested in this point? Because it's been a while, and I was telling them there has been so many other pieces of productions doing about them. What inspired you, and what what made you think of doing something differently? Because it's tough when it's so much information out.
Yeah, so I mean, this project really started out of just pure curiosity. I had heard about the Stanford Prison Experiment, but I wasn't a psychology major. I had never studied it, but I was just reading about it one day and noticed that very few of the participants had ever really spoken out in detail about their experience. And I thought that that was curious. It was always Dr. Zimbardo who kind of was owning the narrative over the past 50 years. And I really wanted to know what the participants had to say. And so I decided that I would find them. And to be honest, it was not that easy. A lot of them weren't easy to find. Some of them were only known by prisoner number or guard alias, but I spent a lot of time going through the Stanford archives, finally found their names, and then started calling them. And pretty much every single one, when they picked up the phone, told me that this story really isn't what it seems, or that this story is a lie, or that this story is a fraud. And so that immediately just set me off on this kind of wild goose chase, wanting to talk to as many of them as I possibly could. And their stories really built this new narrative that we hadn't heard before. And that, then it was off to the races.
What was the biggest surprise?
Oh my gosh, there were so many surprises. I think one of the biggest surprises for me, was learning about the multi-hour guard training session that the guards had before the experiment even began. Zimbardo, you know, really frames this story as the guards acted spontaneously and they were doing this of their own accord. And then you learn that they went through this training session where they were told to inflict psychological pain. They were given schedules and tips on how to do their job, essentially.
Torture.
And a lot of the guards, which also was maybe equally as shocking, really felt that they were part of the experimenting team, that the experiment was really only about the prisoners and not about their own behaviors. And, does that make it okay what they did? Maybe not, but it really does recontextualize their actions. And it kind of gives you a much more interesting, better sense of why they did some of the things they did.
When I see now, I saw the 3 episodes. When you see the guys that he chose for each role, I felt that it was like a predisposition. I mean, there is a physical and personality characteristics that make them. It's like he got the best people for each role to kind of manipulate, and then he had some surprises. but it feels like it was way more planned and exploitative than he made it to look like.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for certain. Dr. Zimbardo still maintains that it was a flip of the coin and that they were divided randomly, um, but I think to your point, there were a lot of expectations going into the role. You know, you're given a role as a guard, and a lot of the guys who were chosen to be guards played that role. And so there are a lot of elements to this that kind of get glossed over and that you don't really think about when you're just told the very simple version of the study. And there's definitely still questions about how it was done.
The interviews were to him. Were they done by your team? Were you there?
Yes, I was conducting the interviews 2 days at Zimbardo's house. I think I spoke with him for maybe 6 hours. Um, they were really interesting. Honestly, he was a really charming, smart, thoughtful man, and I was so very grateful that he was willing to sit down and have those conversations with me and let me ask him about the criticisms, and he would still defend his study to the very end, but he sat down, and I really respect him for that.
Clay and Dave, one of the things that surprised me is that they were very thankful to this project.
Oh,
They
wow.
say that is the first time that that somebody actually sat down and listened to them and to their stories, and they feel is the most accurate and fair projection of what actually happened. They were also surprised by the quality of the prison that you created, that it was much better done than the original one. And during the interview, I do believe that there is some residual trauma there. Depending on the questions, the breathing when changed unconsciously. And I wanted to know if it was something you noticed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these men have lived very full lives, probably don't think about the Stanford Prison Experiment very often, to be honest, when they're dealing with family and work and so on. But I do think that I think it affected them in at least in some way, and some more than others. Most definitely, a guard named Chuck Burton says that this experience was one of the three most pivotal experiences of his entire life, including adopting his child. So there was a spectrum for sure of how it affected the different people and different individuals, but I think it's a testament to them that they were able to come participate in this thing and talk about it in a really thoughtful way, and they I really, really am so grateful to them for taking the time to kind of revisit this thing that happened 50 years ago, and walk us through it and think about it and come up with new ideas about it. And yeah, it was lucky that they participated the way that they did.
What is your personal take from that? What's the what stayed with you as a person? I'm not saying as a filmmaker, as a researcher, as a person, because when you read that, I have one kid that studied it in college. I mean, I've seen other productions, and it does make you think about yourself, first of all. And then it makes you think about society, what we're seeing now, how people get manipulated and all that. But I want to know about you personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me it's a really important, despite how valid it is, how factual, how scientific it is, it was still a really important thing that happened and makes me think all the time about what I would do in certain situations. And I think separate of that, it also has changed the way that I think about storytelling. And this is, I know that this isn't necessarily what you were expecting the answer to be, but I really look at people who are good storytellers very differently now, because I can see how much power they wield. If you are really good at selling a narrative, you can reach a lot of people. And I've learned to kind of scrutinize and to maybe take a moment to really look into things on my own and question things and talk to more people as opposed to just taking one person's word as truth.
I know exactly what you mean. Because in my other life, before I did entertainment content and interviews, I was doing hard news. And I'm from Venezuela. This guy, Hugo Chavez, he was one of those people that even if you were against him and knew everything that he did, you end up doing like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um,
I understand where you're going. And I know who you're talking about.
yeah.
What's next? I can't wait to see more now.
Oh, the next one, I'm taking a break from psychology studies, and I'm developing a film right now about an abandoned island surrounded by a lot of white sharks. So there's a psychological element to it, but it's not
But is it
exactly.
fiction or real?
It's real. It's a real story.
Was there people in the island? It's psychological. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
it's a psychological thriller, this one.
Wow, it's so exciting. So how do you choose the stories? I mean, why this one, not another story?
Honestly, it's things that interest me. I love the ocean, I love animals, I love stories about, interesting psychological experimentation. It's really just stories and characters. I get drawn to them, and I have a lot of different kind of pockets of interest, and doesn't always make sense, but yeah, it's just things that I think are gripping and stories worth telling.
I want to go to the island with you when you record that. Not to the jail and all that. The island sounds good. Now, about this in particular, when I know when documentaries and curious people that tell stories like you, because I think I mean, you were saying storyteller, but you are a masterful storyteller. Um, tell a story like this series. It's so there is also purpose. I think when it came out, it changed a little bit the way people saw prisons. I
Mhm.
think that when in the last wave of comments with the Abu Ghraib prison, that the story came back, also make you think about what happens. What in our society right now, what do you think it could impact the most, and what would you like to see at least talked about or changed?
I mean, I think one of Zimbardo's great regrets is that his study didn't impact prison reform as much as he wishes it did. Um, our prisons in the United States are just it's horrendous, the conditions that people live in. I don't know if our series doesn't get into that much, but it's definitely front of mind. Just reminding people that humanity is important, that we must remember to have empathy and sympathy for our brothers and sisters. And I think all that this series does is kind of explore these ideas of human nature and good versus evil. And I just really hope that people watch it and think to themselves, what would I do in that situation? And let me try to move forward in my life behaving the way that I really believe I would behave if I was put into that same scenario. So,
I like the aware of master manipulators.
yes, that too.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's a very important piece of television. And last, if anybody wanna go and work with you, what do they need to do? Nelly, I'm there.
Just start brainstorming some good ideas and let's get to talking.
Send them your way. Yo, people, come on. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure it's gonna be also before and after in your career. So I can't wait for the effect and everything else you're bringing our way.
Thank you so much.